Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Wrestling Discussions. Man, oh man, on today's episode, we have a lot to discuss. Um, Now, in terms of regarding last night's Monday Night Raw, I'm not going to dive into every single match, nor am I going to dive into every single draft pick. I unfortunately did not get to every single draft pick. I will try and cover some more as the episodes move on and things like that, things of that nature. But nonetheless, I am going to talk about everything important that happened on Monday Night Raw last night, or everything that I find to be very significant. And I'm going to start with the number one draft pick of Monday Night Raw last night. And for once, it wasn't a guy, it was a female. And it was a female that I think everyone will agree deserves it more than anyone else on the roster right now. And that is Rhea Ripley, current SmackDown Women's Champion, former Raw Women's Champion, former NXT Women's Champion, former Women's Tag Champion alongside that of Nikki Cross, or formerly known as Nikki ASH. Nonetheless, though, I think it's safe to say, and I think everyone can agree with me, Rhea Ripley deserves the number one draft pick more than anyone else. The fact that she's been in that ring with some of the best, the fact that she's put on some of the best work with some of the best, and the fact that she has proven herself to be just as good as one of the guys, without a doubt proves that she deserves to be number one pick, just like that of Roman Reigns. Nonetheless, though, last night's drafting was very interesting, and I will admit, WWE, with their drafting, I don't want to say they messed up on some things, but there's some things that they didn't cover all their bases, if you will. So it's safe to say that Judgment Day and the LWO have been they've been facing off here for a little bit. And I don't know if things are finally coming to an end or what exactly the issue is here, but nonetheless, they're going their separate ways. The LWO is going to SmackDown, that includes Rey Mysterio, and the Judgment Day is going to Monday Night Raw. Now, and that includes Rhea Ripley. Rhea Ripley is going to Raw, just like I predicted, which means Rhea Ripley and Bianca Belair will be having a title swap. Now, there will also be another title swap because Austin Theory has been drafted to SmackDown, the Blue brand. Now, I said this in yesterday's episode. I personally would love to see Austin Theory keep the U.S. belt for a little while longer and really do some more things with it. So I hope that that is the case. I hope Austin Theory does a lot more with that United States Championship. And one can only assume that that's what's going to happen. Now, all that being said, Austin Theory has also so far been in a thing with Bobby Lashley and Bronson Reed. Now, Bobby Lashley did get drafted to SmackDown. I don't know if Bronson Reed did or not. Again, I haven't covered all the drafts yet myself, so I'm not sure who all got drafted and who didn't. As far as I know, Bronson Reed is on I want to say SmackDown. I think that's the most logical one, considering him and Theory and Bobby were still in a bit of a thing, but I can't say for sure. On top of that, though, I also did say in yesterday's episode I would be glad to see Austin Theory go into the Blue brand, and that hasn't changed. I am very happy to see Austin Theory on Team Blue. I think it'll suit him well. I think being on Fridays, I don't know. I feel like on Fridays, I feel like he might have more opportunities for some more promos. Not too sure about that, but nonetheless, it would be great to hear him on the stick a little bit more, considering that I do feel as though this past year of 2022, and even somewhat in 2023, he's put on some of his best mic work against some of the best, such as John Cena and Seth Rollins, just to name a couple. On top of that, we've seen another amazing couple of drafts. We saw the Undisputed Tag Team Champions Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn get drafted to Monday Night Raw. The Usos get drafted to SmackDown. So I can only believe that this rivalry between the titles, it's over. I can only believe that when we go into SmackDown, or when we go into Backlash, this main event, or this match between the Usos and Solo and Kevin and Sami and Riddle, that's going to be the end of it. that's going to be the end of Kevin and Sammy in the bloodline. That's my assumption. However, my assumption could be very, very wrong. Like I had said before, the undisputed tag team titles, there has been nothing talked about that. We don't know if they're being split. We don't know if we are getting a new set of tag titles on SmackDown. We don't know what's going on yet with those. So, one can only assume that they're going to do what they did with the World Heavyweight title, and that is they're going to make new titles for the tag team titles over on SmackDown. Again, I'm still unsure about all that. Now, I do want to touch on this as well. We also saw Zelina Vega, because I did say this, the LWO got drafted to SmackDown. Zelina Vega, obviously being a member of the LWO, she was included. And, well, they didn't cover all their bases, I'm going to say that. WWE messed up on one specific thing, and that is that Bianca Belair is going to be the SmackDown Women's Champion, as she is going to be having a title swap with Rhea Ripley, one can only assume. However, what that means is that Zelina Vega and Rhea Ripley, if they are to have this match at Backlash, it would potentially be for the Raw Women's title, which means if Zelina were to win, she would be Raw Women's Champion and would have to therefore go to Monday Night Raw. And it wouldn't make sense for her to have to leave the LWO, so one can only assume that Rhea Ripley is ultimately going to win. However, I think everyone already knew Rhea was going to win, and I'm not trying to say that Rhea was going to lose. I'm simply saying that WWE didn't cover all their bases in trying to make it seem like Zelina has a chance here. You know what I mean? I'm not sure if anyone else picked up on that. On top of that, though, many people... There's been a lot of talk, even on Monday Night Raw, with like highlights and just promos and everything, with this match between Io Sky and Bianca Belair. And I gotta be completely honest, if Io doesn't win this, I will be slightly surprised. I really thought Bianca was gonna lose at WrestleMania. To be honest with you, I thought Bianca was gonna lose at the Royal Rumble to Alexa Bliss. But she is still Raw Women's Champion. Somehow, some way, she has persevered, and she is still the Raw Women's Champion. Nonetheless, though, I really, really think that if they're gonna have her lose it anytime soon, have her lose it to Io Sky. Io Sky as SmackDown Women's Champion would be fantastic. And it would be a great way to break in the idea of like, oh hey, they just swapped titles. Bianca could lose it. Because they've done that so many times. They did it with the Street Profits. The Street Profits were like unbeatable as Raw Tag Team Champions. Then they get drafted to SmackDown and they swap titles. And then Dolph Ziggler and Bobby Roode beat them. You know what I mean? It can all happen in like... in one quick second, in one snap, you know what I mean? And it's the same thing as Bianca Belair doesn't have as many friends on SmackDown. Alexa Bliss, as far as I know, I don't know where she ended up, but what I do know is that Raquel and Liv Morgan are on Monday Night Raw. The women's tag team titles are going to Monday Night Raw. Bianca Belair is on SmackDown. Asuka, her and Asuka are like, I don't know what they are. I don't know if they're friends. I don't know if they're enemies. They could be frenemies. I don't know. Asuka's going to SmackDown. So we can obviously expect for that rivalry to get renewed. But again, all that being said, one can only assume that this is to insinuate that Bianca Belair is going to lose her title soon. Due to the interference of Damage Control. Perhaps. I don't know. Now, on top of all of that, like I did just mention, Liv Morgan and Raquel Rodriguez, they are going to Raw. Now, there's another women's tag group going to Monday Night Raw in Kaden Carter and Katana Chance. And, well, that's an interesting one because they're set to fight the NXT Tag Team Women's Champions, I believe, tonight against Isla Dawn and Alba Fire for the NXT Women's Tag titles. Now, if you want my prediction on that, I'm simply going to go based off of what I've seen so far, and I'm going to say Isla Dawn and Alba Fire. And let me explain why I'm choosing them. It's simply because the fact that Isla Dawn and Alba Fire, as I mentioned in yesterday's episode, they were drafted to Friday Night SmackDown. It would make more sense for them to retain, considering the fact that you want to keep the titles split. You don't want to have two sets of women's tag titles on the same brand. If Kaden and Chance win, they're gonna go over to Raw, And you're going to have them as the NXT Women's Tag Team Champions, and then you're going to have Raquel and Liv Morgan as the Women's Tag Team Champions. And it'd be a little weird to have two sets of women's tag titles. Now, if you want my opinion, you should make Liv and Raquel's titles the Raw Women's Tag titles, and then finally do what a lot of people I think have been hoping for, and that is make brand-based tag titles where each brand on the main roster has its own set of titles for the women. And so what I mean by that is you would have the NXT Women's Tag Team titles. If Alba Fire and Isla Dawn retained, you would have those titles become the SmackDown Women's Tag Team titles. It would be a little easier to keep track of, in my opinion, instead of having to keep doing this idea of like a brand split, in the sense that what's the point of having Liv and Raquel go to Monday Night Raw and be assigned to Monday Night Raw if they're going to have to defend their titles against SmackDown tag teams as well, because it's only fair, right? I don't know. But nonetheless, my prediction is Alba Fire and Isla Dawn, because it just makes sense. And I think they could do more over in the tag division on SmackDown than Kayden and Carter could do down in the tag division at Monday Night Raw. And that's simply to say, not that Kayden and Carter are bad teams, it's simply to say that I think Alba Fire and Isla Dawn have a better gimmick, and they have a better, well-done character development than Kayden and Carter do. And so it just makes sense. Now, I do want to talk about a big thing that happened on Monday Night Raw last night, and that is Seth freaking Rollins. Now, I've been talking about this. I've been going back and forth about this myself since I woke up and heard the news. Seth freaking Rollins has officially been drafted. He's been drafted to Monday Night Raw. Now, I think a lot of people saw that coming. I personally thought it was going to be SmackDown, but nonetheless, I think a lot of people saw it coming. And on top of that, Seth freaking Rollins is going on and on about Night of Champions. He's not even looking at Omos. He's not even contemplating Omos, which I'm not saying that's wrong of him. However, you do need to keep your eye on the ball when you're fighting the Nigerian Giant. So he's going to have to keep an eye on that later on down the road, because Omos knows what he's doing. Omos was in action last night, and he called out Seth Rollins, backstage, He hopes Seth was watching that. And I hope Seth was watching that, because Seth is going to have to be prepared, and he's going to have to be ready when he goes into this match at Backlash. Now, that being said, nonetheless, Seth freaking Rollins had an interesting segment last night where he actually had a one-on-one promo with a certain wise man of the bloodline known as Paul Heyman. Now, I don't know if you've been watching my videos here lately, but yesterday's video and some of the videos from last week have all talked about a certain individual in Seth freaking Rollins challenging for the undisputed Universal Heavyweight Championship that is held currently by the Tribal Chief, the head of the table, Roman Reigns. And, well, we might get that a little sooner than we all thought. Me personally, I don't know if anyone else picked up on this, but Paul Heyman mentioned Roman Reigns quite a bit last night. In fact, Paul Heyman, even as far as I know, mentioned the fact that Roman Reigns, Roman Reigns isn't going to be on Monday Night Raw. He isn't going to have the World Heavyweight Championship. And then he mentioned about, what if the World Heavyweight Championship was around the waist of Roman Reigns? And he also started to kind of call out the fact that there were certain individuals that kept running their mouths about Roman Reigns, such as Seth freaking Rollins. And then Seth proceeded to come out. He called out Roman Reigns. He said how Roman's been ducking him. He said how Roman owes him a rematch, which I don't disagree. I don't think any of us can disagree with that, because it's true. Roman Reigns does technically owe Seth Rollins a rematch. Now, that being said, Seth Rollins also brought up something. He mentioned how at Night of Champions he's going to be the new World Heavyweight Champion. And he's going to be, unlike Roman Reigns, a fighting champion. Here's my thing with that. Paul Heyman mentioned Roman Reigns a few times. Seth Rollins mentioned Roman Reigns a few times. Roman Reigns should not be mentioned when talking about the World Heavyweight Championship, right? Why Paul Heyman would even bring up the World Heavyweight Championship when discussing Roman Reigns is interesting to me. One, in my opinion, one can only assume that Roman Reigns is going to come for the World Heavyweight title. Now, we could see Roman Reigns fight for the World Heavyweight title at Night of Champions. Or, if you want my opinion, we could see Seth freaking Rollins get screwed by Roman Reigns at Night of Champions. Which could then ultimately lead to a match between Seth freaking Rollins and Roman Reigns for the Undisputed Universal Championship. However, it could go a number of ways, because we could see Roman Reigns versus Seth for the World Heavyweight title at Night of Champions. We could see Roman screw Seth. We could see Seth win, and then we could see maybe all the way going down to Survivor Series, the long-awaited match between Seth freaking Rollins and Roman Reigns. I don't know how it's going to go. I don't know how it's going to play out. What I do know is that Cody Rhodes also had something to say. Not just Seth. Cody Rhodes mentioned how he is not going to go to the back of the line. He may be on Monday Night Raw, but it seems to me like the dude wants gold. So I don't know if he's going to go for the World Heavyweight title, if he's going to try and go after Roman Reigns still. I don't know what that means. What I do know is he also got into another confrontation with Brock Lesnar last night, and security was involved again. Now, hopefully, whether it's at Backlash or whether it's soon, hopefully we see these two square off, because it needs to happen at this point. They're building it up too much. It's getting too hectic. It's getting too insane. We need to once and for all see Brock and Cody showdown and just have one massive brawl. Now, back to Seth freaking Rollins for a minute. We saw Seth freaking Rollins versus Solo Sikoa in the main event of Monday Night Raw. And during that match, we saw Paul Heyman on the phone. I can only assume it was with Roman Reigns. I can only assume it was with the Tribal Chief, the Undisputed World Heavyweight Champion. But my question is, why would he be on the phone with Roman Reigns while Seth freaking Rollins is out there? My assumption is that Roman Reigns is seeing what Seth freaking Rollins is having to say. And Roman Reigns is getting tired of him talking about Roman. Roman does not like Seth mentioning his name. And so I can only assume that they are building up for a Seth Rollins versus Roman Reigns match. That is my hope. So I'm hoping that's what that's what it is. I'm hoping that's what we're going to see. Now, on top of that, we also saw, like I mentioned earlier, the Usos are going to SmackDown. So the Usos are staying with the bloodline. They're staying with the rest of the family. But the issue is, the Usos didn't get drafted with the rest of the family. The Usos had to sit at home for a few days and wait and contemplate and question and wonder, are they going to Raw? Are they going to SmackDown? Are they going with Solo and Roman and Paul? Are they getting split up from the bloodline? What's going on here? What's the issue? Why did Roman not want us all to be drafted together? That's something the Usos have to look at. That's something the Usos have to watch and be wary of. And we also saw in the main event, Seth Rollins versus Solo Sikoa. Seth was this close on closing into a victory, and unfortunately, Solo Sikoa had backup. The Usos getting involved, causing a disqualification. This is now the second main event on Monday Night Raw in a row that has ended due to disqualification. Last week's being Damian Priest's match versus Rey Mysterio. This week's being Seth freaking Rollins versus the Enforcer Solo Sikoa. And I also want to say that throughout that match, Solo Sikoa has really proven to be the Enforcer. He's really proven to be this out-of-control guy who is like an animal, and all he does is fight and brawl. And he really is the Enforcer. He enforces violence, and I love the way he can bring that character to life. It's very enticing, it's very fun, and it just brings the joy for professional wrestling back into my heart for a minute. Now, on top of that, we saw Solo Sikoa and Seth freaking Rollins have one hell of a match. Did end in disqualification, but immediately after we saw Kevin Owens, Sami Zayn, and Matt Riddle come to the aid of Seth freaking Rollins. And now, this is probably just some stupid joke, but did anyone else notice that Solo Sikoa was getting teamed up on by Seth freaking Rollins and Matt Riddle? Two people that around this time last year hated each other. I mean, did anyone catch Clash of the Castle last year? Did anyone catch Extreme Rules? These two went to war last year, both mentally and physically. I don't know, but it just seemed like an interesting thing to pick up on. Now, I am going to move away from the... Oh, wait, sorry. I don't want to move away from it quite yet. I do want to touch up on this as well. We did see Bad Bunny talk a little bit more on Damian Priest. I can only assume Bad Bunny is ready for his match, his street fight nonetheless. That's going to be wildly entertaining, like I had mentioned before. On top of that, you have what is, the Judgment Day going to Raw, Finn Balor on Raw, Dominic on Raw, Damian on Raw, Rhea on Raw, all four of them on Raw. They were in action against the LWO, so I can only assume that's going to kind of be the closure of this rivalry, of these issues between the LWO and the Mysterios. Or, sorry, the LWO and the Judgment Day. Now, I do want to take a step back for a minute. I do want to move away from Raw for a little bit, and I want to move on to tonight's NXT. Man, so, again, last week we saw Carmelo Hayes and Braun Breaker have some major issue. We saw Carmelo Hayes call out Braun Breaker after he beat Grayson Waller, who I also want to say got drafted as well. I don't know to which brand yet. I haven't fully caught up, so if you know which brand, please comment down below. But back to what I was saying, Carmelo Hayes beating Grayson Waller last week for the NXT World Championship, then calling out Braun Breaker for the upcoming pay-per-view of NXT's Battlegrounds. And from what I can understand, Braun Breaker accepted that challenge when he took out Trick Williams and Carmelo Hayes from behind. On top of that, he could have very well put Carmelo Hayes on the shelf for a week or two. We might not even see Carmelo Hayes on TV tonight. Now, we still have this thing between Dijak and Ilya Dragunov, which, again, I don't know if you guys remember me saying this, but I'm all for that rivalry. I'm all for that idea of big man versus guy who beats big men. I mean, we saw Ilya Dragunov beat Gunther. We saw Ilya Dragunov beat, I believe he defeated Von Wagner. So, there's a number of people Ilya Dragunov could fend off at this point. I'm not going to dive much into the NXT tag titles. I will say this, Pretty Deadly, a tag team who have been on NXT vying for tag titles for a while, are officially going to the Blue brand. They are now on the main roster, which I say congratulations to them. I think they deserve it. I think they're a good enough tag team with a good enough gimmick to last them a little bit. I think Pretty Deadly going into a rivalry with Los Lotharios would be an interesting dynamic, or even Hit Row. But nonetheless, I think either of those would be interesting to see. Now, we also saw, with this idea of Indy Hartwell going to Monday Night Raw, I'm intrigued to see Indy Hartwell on NXT. Because what does that mean now for the NXT Women's division? Are they still going to have free reign of fighting Indy Hartwell for the NXT Women's Championship? That's the question at hand here, right? So I don't exactly know what that means. What I do know is that we're going to have to be ready and waiting for that. And on top of that, I'm pretty sure this week we're going to see Gigi Dolan versus JC Jane, I believe. I'm not sure. This is what I've heard. And as far as I know, Gigi Dolan's little brother is going to be front row. And I'm hoping to see some interaction with that. I'm hoping to see her little brother front row, Gigi Dolan maybe, having some interaction with her little brother, hugging him, that sort of thing. JC Jane probably maybe booing him, taunting him, taking a fallen Gigi Dolan and shoving her in his face. I don't know, but nonetheless, those are just some ideas, some things that I think could bring this rivalry and this dynamic just a little more higher up on the totem pole, if you will. But that's all I really have to say for now, because I don't have much to say in regards to the NXT Tag Titles or the NXT North American Championship, but nonetheless, I still think this is all really interesting stuff to look at and focus on, and one can only hope for a great 2023 after what is supposedly going to be a really, really good draft. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to be all for tonight's episode. As always, thank you all for tuning in. Hope you have a great night, and peace out.